I've done the whole pride thing, and it cost me everything but my actual life.
You are now listening to the Going North podcast, where you'll receive tips and techniques to advance yourself. I'm your host, Dom Brightman, and every week we're going to be hearing from an author who's going to share their expertise to help you charge forward in life. On a quick side note, be sure to check out Going North the book. It's available in ebook, audio, as well as paperback form for those who love to read a traditional book. Now let's get on with the show.
And today on the Going North podcast, we have another author yet again, but not just any author. I'm honored to have this guest right here because he is a fellow Christian, also a speaker, and a best-selling author of the book called Inverted Leadership, as well as Extraordinary Leadership. And this wonderful guy right here, in addition to all those things, he is also one of the guides for the young ones going into a new age, because he is a high school teacher and a soccer coach. And you're probably wondering who this wonderful person I got on the podcast today. It's the one, the only Joel Hawbaker. How are you today, sir?
Hey, I am very well. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, yeah, man. I'm looking forward to it, too. When I looked on your Amazon bio and noticed that not only you wrote a leadership book, is also noticed that your father also was in the 82nd Airborne Division.
He was.
Like, yeah, my dad was, too, in the World War II. I was like, oh, my gosh, this is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Something already.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, we've got a big shadow box in our what we call the room of requirement, which is a not very subtle Harry Potter reference, but what other people would probably call a den. We have a big shadow box with all of my dad's medals and ribbons and different things like that from his military career that a friend of ours made years ago after he passed away. So it's got his flag from his military funeral from he had the full honors and 21 gun salute and all that. And so we've got the flag and ribbons, and it brought me to tears when my wife gave it to me as a gift, actually. So it's always fun to meet other people whose parents have served in similar ways and can connect on that sort of thing. So yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, man. It was like, man, it's tough to serve on any form of military at all, and it's even tougher once you come back if you survive.
Yeah.
You got to fight the whole new battlefield of just being with civilians.
Yeah, I'm sure. And especially I know, so my dad spent 18 months in Vietnam, and the way that a lot of those soldiers were treated when they came home is different than any other military conflict we've had. Most of the time soldiers come home after serving in combat, and they are rightly treated as heroes. And a lot of the soldiers came back from Vietnam were not treated that way. So, yeah, there's that sort of extra layer of not only are we back among civilians, we're back among civilians who are not terribly grateful and, in fact, outright hostile sometimes. So I was glad that I'm always glad when I can see how about my wife and kids know whenever we go out anywhere, if I see anybody wearing a Vietnam veteran ball cap, then I'm going to go up and say hi. I'm going to ask them what years they were there. I'm going to tell them a little bit about my dad, and then I'm going to tell them thank you, because a lot of times nobody ever has.
Amen to that. I think it was like one speech we were in a Toastmaster meeting, and I remember mentioning how folks always like to say thank you for your service, but they never ask them anything beyond that. They never say anything.
Right.
And that's really amazing that you do that, especially for those in that era, because you're right, that era of heroes, they weren't treated the way they should have been treated.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. I've had a couple different people when I've done that. I've run into people at soccer games or wherever it may be, and what years were you over there? Okay, awesome. Yeah, my dad was here at this time, and like I said, I'll tell him thank you. And on at least two occasions, after I've told a Vietnam vet thank you, after he walks away, the spouse will turn and look at me and say, thank you for doing that. Nobody's ever actually thanked him before. And that just breaks my heart that it's been, 40 or 50 years and no one's ever said, hey, thanks for traveling halfway around the world and being willing to get shot at. And, we appreciate that. It boggles my mind that nobody's ever done that for certain veterans. So yeah, it is it's important to make sure that we express our gratitude, especially for people who have sacrificed so much that way.
Amen to that indeed. So coming from a lineage of heroes through your dad, and now a best-selling author, mind filling in the gaps of, I'm guessing, the in-between thing?
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting. Both my mom and my dad were military, actually. Dad was 20 years in the Army, and mom spent, again, I can't remember, 10 or 15 in the Army Reserves. And as I was growing up, both of them encouraged me not to join the military, not because there's anything wrong with it, but they just wanted me to take a different path. And but I learned a lot about leadership from both of my parents. I was very blessed to have a great role model in my dad, and also after my parents divorced, my stepdad, who was also military. I think he was 15 years in the Army. He was a jump master. I don't think he was 82nd. He may have been 101st. But yeah, so obviously there's a lot of military in my upbringing, and so I'm grateful for those kinds of things. I had a great role model in my high school soccer coach. He was also my youth pastor at church, and he is the reason why I went to college where I did. I wanted to play soccer at the same place he had, which is Covenant College in Lookout Mountain, Georgia. And so while I was there, I played soccer for 2 years, then got married for the first time at age 19. And about a year later found out we were pregnant with our first kid. And so in May of 2004, I graduated college, had a child, and moved 500 miles to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and started teaching high school. And so that was 21 years old. So wife and kid and college degree and high school teacher and coach. And that was, I look back and I think, what was I thinking? And then I remember both of my parents saying, Are you sure you want to do these things? And I remember going, yeah, of course. And I don't regret any of them because they are part of my story. They're part of my journey. And God has used those experiences to teach me. But I look back and I think, man, everybody who said that I was crazy, they weren't necessarily wrong. So, so that first marriage lasted 8.5 years, and things did not go the way that either one of us had hoped. And we ended up getting divorced in, I think, 2010 or 2011. And I've been remarried now, very happily remarried for 4.5 years. My ex-wife is remarried. And we live about 1.5 miles apart. Our kids go back and forth each week. We've got 2 daughters. And at my ex-wife's house, my little girls also have a little brother now. And so the girls are 14 and 11. And at their mom's house, their brother is 3. And so the topics that I talk about are leadership and education, but also blended family life or step family life, because it is so common in our culture. And unfortunately, it's often done very poorly, typically by people who are hurting and therefore use whatever weapons are at their disposal. And unfortunately, a lot of times that means their kids. And so I'm very grateful and very humbled by the fact that all 4 of us that are in this situation, we work hard to raise our kids together. So we've had lots of giant family sit downs. We get together on holidays and on birthdays and things like that. And again, part of the reason that we are able to do that well is because I saw my parents do it well. When my mom and dad divorced when I was in middle school, they made sure they never badmouthed each other. They made sure we got to spend lots of time with both parents. We lived with mom, but dad came and picked us up every morning for school. He was at all of our sporting events. We still got together and had Thanksgiving at mom's house, all of us together, mom, dad, mom's boyfriend, mom's boyfriend's dad. and everybody got along. Everybody was kind. Everybody was respectful. And I'm very grateful for that example because it's allowed me to try to create the same sort of situation in my world. And so a lot of the stuff in the book are stories about things that I've learned from other people, or they're stories about my mistakes. And the goal of telling those stories is to try to help people avoid making some of the same ones that I have. So, I'm very grateful for my wife. I'm grateful to be able to have a job that I love. I think very few people get to say that they look forward to work most days. And I do, because I love teaching high school. I love coaching soccer. And I tell kids all the time, if I just had $1 million sitting in the bank, I would still want to do this kind of thing because it's just fun. And so for the past year, speaking and writing a book and going and speaking at different conferences and churches and schools and things like that, man, that's just a bonus. It's like an extension of the classroom. I get to go and I get to teach people. I get to share the gospel, and I get to meet people that are going through similar things that I've gone through, that maybe I can help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made, and to just see the way that God has opened doors through a lot of my mistakes is something that's very humbling, and I'm very grateful for that, to be able to share. So again, I appreciate the chance to be on here and talk with you and share with your audience, and hopefully encourage them, inspire them, and also maybe just help people realize that maybe they're not the only one going through what they think they're going, or they're not the only one going through what they're going through. There are other people out there that have experienced it, and we're glad to help. We're glad to support each other. We're glad to encourage each other.
Amen to that, man. Amen to that. I mean, especially the blended families topic. I think it was Dr. Dwayne Mangum. He's a preacher out in Waldorf, Maryland area. He actually wrote a book called Blended to Make It, and it's got folks like both yourself and him just addressing that message and addressing that topic because it's so prevalent nowadays. I mean, most folks these days, they usually come equipped with a child, so it's like,
yeah,
yeah. Most families are going to be blended nowadays, so it's like, you gotta have some tools to be able to, I wouldn't want to say combat that, but a way to try to manage your way through that and making sure you give the appropriate amount of love and respect and admiration and time towards every party involved, because it's basically not only different emotions but different upbringings and different styles of discipline too.
Yep, so absolutely.
It's loaded, man.
Yeah, it is. There's actually one of the books that we read before my wife and I got married is called The Smart Step Family by Ron Deal. And he's I want to say he's a pastor, and I forget where, but that book was tremendously helpful to us because it talked about just what you just said. A lot of the issues that you're going to face are issues that you would face in a traditional family, but even more complicated because it's not just one set of parents. It's multiple sets of parents, and so it's not 2 different types of upbringings. It's 4 types of upbringings, like you just mentioned. And you just, if you know those things ahead of time, it can help you come up with strategies for how to deal with those things maybe better than you might if left to your own devices. I know for me, I've actually learned a lot from my wife because I'm not a step parent. I'm a parent. She's the step parent in our family. And so I've learned a lot just by listening to her. That is, she, because of her role, it's different. And it's helped open my eyes to how differently she sees things, not just because she's a woman, but because being the step parent of 2 daughters and being the female in our house, she sees things differently than I do. And so one of the greatest things for me is just to sit and listen and say, okay, yeah, I never would have thought of it that way. I appreciate you explaining that to me. I could see why that would be really exciting, or I could see why that would be hurtful, or I could see why that would be complicated, or whatever the situation is. I'm really grateful to be able to learn from her how to be a better parent by listening to her tell me what it's like to be a step parent, because I can't imagine how difficult that is. And, God bless you to all those people who are willing to love not only their own kids, but also someone else's kids just like their own. That's a huge it's a huge outpouring of love, and it's a wonderful reflection of the gospel. God loved us even before we loved him. And for step parents to be willing to say, I know this could be messy and ugly and hurtful, but I'm going to choose to love you even if you don't love me yet. And I'm going to choose to love you always. Man, that's a wonderful picture of the gospel. I love that. And that's something I'm grateful to be able to see.
Amen to that. Amen to that, man. So what led you to becoming a Christian? I'm pretty sure you probably had some biblical foundations built up with your family and all, but
I did. I was raised in the church and grew up going to church with both my parents before they divorced, and continued going with dad after my parents divorced. But I also went to a Christian high school and actually got saved at a high school soccer tournament for Christian schools. And so we play soccer games during the day and then have a worship service at night. And it was at one of those that I got saved. And that made a huge difference in my world, because it went from being head knowledge to heart knowledge. Instead of just being cognitively aware that I was a sinner, I really started to see my own sin. And that was a huge thing. Went to Covenant College, which is a small PCA college on top of Lookout Mountain, Georgia. So if you go to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and drive up the mountain, you're back in Georgia. That's where the college is. It's beautiful. It was a life-changing place. That was kind of the next step in my spiritual growth, because now I was surrounded by Christians who weren't just Christians. They were also Christians who were serious about learning and about applying their Christianity in every area of life. And that was really excellent. And then really probably the next big step was after my divorce, when I stopped seeing myself simply as a person who sins, and started really understanding that ultimately I'm not a good person who sins. Deep down, I am just a sinner. And what I really need is, I don't need a God to forgive me of my sin. I need a God who's big enough to forgive me for the fact that I am sinful. That is, forgive my sinfulness. Because again, it changed my perspective to realize basically we are, because of Adam, we really are just sinful people. It's not that we're good people who sometimes mess up. If left to my own devices, I'm not actually a very nice person. I'm not very friendly. I'm not very loving. And I need God to change my heart. And that was really eye-opening for me. And so in the past 8 or 9 years, I've really learned a lot about just how much I need grace and the gospel every single day. And again, I'm really thankful to teach at a small Christian high school, because part of my job is to teach a Bible class. And so that means every single day I get to read the Bible and pray with kids and read these great books from Christian authors, whether it's C.S. Lewis or Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Tim Keller. I get to teach these books to kids, and they pay me for that. Man, that's awesome. And so it's been a huge help in my spiritual development to get to teach other people. So yeah, I'm grateful for the way that God uses our life circumstances to shape who we become.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful indeed. It's great where you go to a Christian high school, then you go to a Christian college, and you actually kept what you learned and studied and actually apply it and continue to apply it. And like you mentioned, you didn't pay for it.
It is. I'm telling you, I would do it even if I were independently wealthy. But it's a bonus to get paid for it. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. You mentioned that I believe you had a teacher back in your high school as a soccer coach. Did he inspire you to become a soccer coach as well?
He did, yeah. I wanted to be just like this guy. After my own dad, and maybe my stepdad as well. The guy's name is Eric, and Eric has been the largest influence in my life. Like I said, after my dad and my stepdad, he's just been huge. And I wanted to go to the same college he went to and play for the same college coach he played for, and I got to do those things. And in doing those things, I fell in love with the game even more than I already had. And so at this point, I'm 36 years old. I've been around the game of soccer for 33 of those 36 years, either playing it or coaching it. And I love the game. I love the life lessons that you can teach. And I owe a lot of that to Eric, because the way he coached us in high school was to remind us that we were there to become better people. We were there to become better Christians. And soccer was just the vehicle for doing that. And if you do those things, of course, we were trying to win soccer games, but we were trying to win soccer games while sharing the gospel through how we played, how we treat our opponents, how we treat each other, how we treat the referees. And that's something that I've also tried to do in my coaching. I don't think I do it nearly as well as Eric did. I have a bit more of a temper, and it's been a bit more of a struggle to because the thing is, I mean, it's athletic, so it is competitive. But ultimately, God does not care if we win or lose a soccer game. He does care about our heart condition before, during, and after the game. Am I treating the referees with respect? Because if I'm not, my Christian testimony after the game is terrible. And I have a very embarrassing story about that. A number of years ago, I was coaching a travel soccer game, a club soccer game, and the referee made a call that I disagreed with, and I very strongly let my opinion be known, to the point where the referee threw me out of the game 20 minutes into it. So a typical game is 80 or 90 minutes, depending on the age level. And we were maybe 20 minutes into the game, and he threw me out. And then I could not believe he threw me out of the game. And I yelled at him before I walked away. And then a month later, his wife and like 4 of his kids showed up at our church one Sunday morning.
Wow.
As visitors. Yeah, they sat like 2 pews behind me, and it's a small church, so it's not like they didn't see me. It's not like there's no hiding. There's no 5,000 people like mega church. It's less than 100 people. It's less than 50 people most Sundays. And so they walked in, and I turned around, and I got this sick feeling in my gut. And my wife said, "What is it?" And I said, "I am going to have to apologize to those people right there." And so, after the church service, I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I don't know if you recognize me or not, but here's who I am." And it was funny because that game where the referee threw me out, I believe his wife was one of the assistant referees that day. So she did recognize me, and I've had like 3 of their children as referees in other games. And so I just went up to her. I said, "Listen, here's who I am. Whether you remember it or not, here's what I did. And I just need to ask your forgiveness, because the way that I talked with your husband, the way that I spoke to him, not acceptable, not the way that I should be treating anybody, but especially a fellow believer." And I don't have any excuse other than I'm a sinful person, and I'm really sorry. And to her credit, she forgave me, and we didn't have any problems. And I've seen their family as referees many times since then, and it's typically much better, which I appreciate. And but it's one of those things where if I'm coaching soccer and I don't represent Christ well, then what am I doing there? Because ultimately, what matters more, sharing the gospel or winning a soccer game? Well, obviously, it's sharing the gospel. Well, if I talk to you like you're an idiot for 80 minutes during a soccer game, that's how long our high school games are, and then after the game, I try to invite you to come to church with me, that doesn't work. And so it's been a good learning experience for me to look back at the great example that Eric set as my coach, and to try to emulate that. And again, I fail a lot more often than I care to admit, but I am thankful that our God is a God of grace, and he is not done with me yet. He continues to help me to grow and to learn and to have more self-control. And those are good things to pass on to people as well.
That's right indeed. And you took it to another level by writing and publishing a book. So what led to that decision?
I started speaking just over a year ago, and my wife and I were talking one day and sort of asked the question, what would make it possible to be able to get this message out to even more people? Because the book, you mentioned inverted leadership. The subtitle is Lead Others Better by Forgetting About Yourself. And the whole thing is about gospel-centered leadership. And so the question was, how can we impact more people? And the answer was, well, write it down. And so I did that over the course of about 3 or 4 months. Actually, it was fun. The school where I teach is about 45 minutes away from where I live. And so that means I have an hour and a half in the car every day. And so that was when I did most of my writing. I actually got this idea from a guy named Chandler Bolt, who wrote a book called Published. He owns a company called Self-Publishing School. And so what I did is I would map out my chapters ahead of time. I would write them out in outline form on a 3x5 card and sort of tape it to my steering wheel. And then I had a miniature cassette recorder, like a newspaper reporter from the 1990s would use. And I would drive down the road and kind of glance at my 3x5 card and speak into the cassette recorder, and then bring the tape home and give it to my wife, and she would type it up for me. And that became the rough draft of the book. And then over Christmas break and spring break, whenever I had time in between school events, I would edit the book and that kind of thing. And then we got it published this summer. So yeah, it was very it was an interesting process, both the idea of writing a book, because I've always loved writing. The book you mentioned, Extraordinary Leadership, that one's about my dad, and I started that as a biography about him before he died. Well, this summer was 10 years ago, and I just finished that book last year. So it shouldn't have taken me 9 years to write a 50-page ebook. That's a little ridiculous. So I'm really thankful that the second book actually didn't take nearly as much time.
Yeah, but hey, I mean, it kind of goes back to like God's timing indeed. I mean, hey, maybe the book wasn't meant to be out at a certain time. I mean, it kind of goes with God's timing. Funny enough, I had like an old business card holder. Well, it wasn't really old. I had it for a few months, but the leather was peeling off. Mm-hmm. And one of my mastermind buddies, who's a fellow Christian, she wanted to get this birthday gift to me, and my birthday was like about a month ago at the time of this recording, because she was having car trouble too. And then funny enough, when I opened the gift, it was a business card holder. And I was like, yo, dude, I was about to get a new business
That's
card
right.
freaking week. So it's like,
yep.
I mean, looking back, I mean, hey, you got a second book that was done in a quicker amount of time than a 50-page ebook, but hey, you never know. Some messages may need to reach people at a time when God needs them to hear it, not when you want
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. God's timing is definitely better than our timing, and I'm continue to be amazed by the doors that He opens through the book and the people that He's impacted with it. My best friend got married last weekend, again at the time of this recording, and we had a great time, and it was fun to stand up there with him and see him take his vows and get married, and that was wonderful. On a little side note, one of the fun parts for me, in addition to obviously being in my best friend's wedding, was that at the ceremony, one of his relatives came up to me and was like, hey, I read your book and it was awesome. It made a huge impact on me, and I've shared it with a bunch of other people, and I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed it. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Thank you very much. It was, somebody, it was a family member of his that I've known for years but hadn't seen in a while. And that was completely out of the blue. And that was just fun. Like, I love being encouraged by that. Not just, I mean, obviously we love to be praised for things that we've done, but it also encourages me to hear that he was impacted by it and that he cared enough about the book to share it with other people. That makes me really honored and feel very humbled by that kind of thing. I love it when God uses things that we've done to impact people that we didn't even know it was impacting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, and your book is great, by the way. Now, granted, I didn't
Thank you.
it, but I did thoroughly enjoy chapter 1. I even highlighted a few things. One of my favorite things I highlighted was you mentioned how man is an image bearer of God to the world. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that's true, because it's like, it's like, hey, we got these minds, we can create things while we're on here, like books and programs and things like that. Mm-hmm. You have a sense of humor. God has a sense of humor, and it's like you get to share that light up through a humor or a positive word with someone else. And it's like, wow, that is like really powerful.
Yeah. Well, good. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'm honored by that. Thank you. And I'm glad you got something out of it. Yeah, that's one that I'm glad to be a teacher, because I get reminded every day that I teach students, no matter how much that particular freshman may be driving me up a wall that day, that kid is still an image bearer of God. And when I can remember that, because it's easy to forget, when I can remember that, it reminds me to treat them better. C.S. Lewis said it great. He said, we've never met another mere mortal. Every human being you encounter is an immortal being. And, again, that's just a very sobering reminder that the way we treat people is a reflection of our worldview. If we buy into the fact that we're all here as a cosmic accident, if we're here as the result of some random chemical process billions of years ago, then then why does it matter how I treat you? I'm only going to be here 70-ish years. You're only going to be here 70-ish years. And then we go back into nothingness. So why not just look out for me and get everything I can? But if I understand that, one, someone else made me and therefore they have a claim on me, and two, someone else made you and therefore they have a claim on you, well, then we need to treat each other differently. And again, that's easy to forget. But when we are reminded of our the fact that we are image bearers, man, it changes how we treat people, and it changes how we treat people for the better, or at least it should.
Yeah, you're right about that, especially since you're basically in the job where you're basically playing the long game because
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like,
Yeah.
acting bad now, but like down the road, 10 years later, they may come back into school and they may donate money to school as like a lucrative business owner. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's something I love the school I teach at, and I love the administrators I have. They're wonderful people. And our principal reminds us all the time. She says, you guys are seed planters. And our athletic director is the same way. He says, we are seed planters. We are not going to reap the benefits of the time that we spend with these kids. But someone is years down the road. We may never even see it. They may leave and never come back, and we never even hear about it. But we need to trust that God is going to use our efforts to impact these kids in a positive way. And that's okay if we never see it, because that's not our job. Our job is to just plant the seed and water it and do the best we can in the limited amount of time we have, and then trust that God will do with it whatever he wants to. And so that's a great reminder, because, it's easy to become discouraged as a teacher. Every year that I teach, the kids get a little bit harder to teach because they're more and more attached to their electronics. I teach history and Bible, so I'm very old fashioned anyway. I'm a self-proclaimed kind of dinosaur, so yeah. In my classroom, we don't use devices. We don't use iPads or MacBooks or the kids' phones. Like, I have a shoe rack hanging on a cabinet door. When you come in my room, you put your phone there. And when you leave, you can have your phone back. In my classroom, we use a textbook with pages. And we read the book, and we talk about what's in the book, and we discuss what's in the book, and we talk about how what's in the book affects our lives. And we learn the same way that people have learned for thousands of years, because it works. I don't care if you're Socrates in the ancient world or monks in the medieval world or kids in the 21st century. Reading from a page is what our brain is made for. It's not made for reading from a screen. Scientific studies have shown we learn better if we read from a page. Okay, great. So that means in my history classroom, we're going to work on reading and writing and thinking. And in doing those things, we're also going to try to learn life lessons and pursue virtues and try to learn how to become better people. And we can do all of that without a cell phone. So that's what we're going to do. And sometimes it's easy to get discouraged by how much kids don't want to do that. They would rather and again, this is not every kid, but every year it's a higher percentage of kids. If you gave them the option to actually learn or to just be on their phone, most kids would choose to be on their phone. And so it's easy to get discouraged by that. And so it's great to be reminded, even if I can't necessarily entertain the kids as well as their phone would, that's okay. That's not my job. My job is to love them and teach them. And if I can do those things well, then I've done my job.
Amen to that indeed. Amen to that indeed. I love how you're combating the current zombie apocalypse, man.
Yeah, it's, again, cell phones, and I tell kids all the time, the problem is not the phone. The problem is the use you make of it. The cell phone itself is amoral. It's not good or bad. It's just a device like a car or anything else. It is just a thing, right? But the use you make of it, that's what makes it good or bad. And if the use you make of it is causing you to ignore your schoolwork, ignore your parents, and be socially isolated, well, that's not a good thing. You need to break that addiction. You need to break that habit. You need to break that piece of control over you. And so it's a never-ending battle. I'm known around the school as kind of the curmudgeon. The teachers know, don't ask Coach Hawbaker to do anything with technology. He'll probably say no. The kids know, don't ask Coach Hawbaker if you can be on your phone. Don't ask him if you can go get a computer to work on something unless it's for an actual school project. Because I tell kids, like in my classroom, I have 1,000,000 books. I have magazines. I have newspapers. I have all kinds of reading material. If you have free time, go pick up a book. No, you cannot play on your phone. And that's just that's one of the things I'm known for. I am 100% okay with that.
That's right, baby. That's right. Curmudgeon dinosaur swag, baby.
That's it. That's kind of it. And it's funny because I've been this way my whole life. My sister was up here for my best friend's wedding last week, and she lives down in Florida. But she came up for the wedding, and at one point she was trying to ask. She asked me a question about something that I needed to email her, and I handed her my phone. I said, "Here, just email it to yourself." And she looked at my phone. She said, "I don't even know what that is." And it's because my phone is like a $30 Microsoft Go phone that I got at Walmart. It's barely a smartphone, and I've had it for like 4 or 5 years, and it does the job that I need it to do, which is basically to make phone calls and send text messages. And that's it. And you know what? I'm fine with that. And there's nothing wrong with having a great smartphone and loving your phone. That's okay. But my problem is if you can't actually live your life without your phone with you, you've turned your phone into an object of worship, and that's a dangerous place to be. Now, I've done that with plenty of other things. I've done that with soccer. I've done that with basketball. I've made those things into idols. So it's not that I'm free of idolatry. It's just that my idolatry is different than most people's. My idolatry might be Tolkien books. I don't know. It might be, Lord of the Rings or something. It's a different struggle than a lot of people have.
Hey, right. Everybody's got their own vices that they have to deal with.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, I think it was probably, what was it, Counterfeit Gods that Timothy Keller wrote?
I think he wrote that one. I've got 2 or 3 of his other ones, but I think that's one of his. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like out of all the ones I've read from him, that's probably the most popular one because it just
okay.
The perspective on what you idolize. It's like, oh man.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't read that one. I'll have to go find it. We've got The Reason for God and the Meaning of Marriage and Prodigal God. That's one I teach in my Bible class. That book completely changed my whole life. That book you can sit down and read it in like an hour and a half, but it blew me away.
Woohoo! That one, I'll probably have to check that one out.
It's his understanding and sort of exposition on the story of the prodigal son. And I don't want to spoil it, but I'm telling you, it opened my eyes to the fact that the story is not about the prodigal son. It's actually about the other son. And I had never thought of it that way. And when I saw it that way, I'm telling you, it entirely changed how I understood not just that story, but my whole life. So yeah, check that one out. I recommend it to everybody. It's fun to teach because it's great to see kids have the same realization I did when they read the book and they go, "Oh, wow, I never thought about it that way." Like, that's just fun.
Heck yeah, man. And speaking of kids, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again in the current year of 2018, with all of your knowledge and experience, what would be the first piece of advice you give to yourself?
I would tell myself, you need to be okay with the fact that you're not as big a deal as you want to think you are. I used to have a major issue with ego and pride. I really wanted to be the greatest and the best and the most popular and the best known and world famous at coaching or teaching or both. And I just had an overly inflated ego, and it cost me because the pride is what ultimately led to my divorce. It's what led to every problem I've had as an adult can be traced right back to my pride. And it wasn't until I lost everything that I realized my pride was the problem. So the biggest thing I would say to myself at 25 is it's not about you, and that needs to be okay.
Wow. No wonder confident humility is your main thing. Okay.
That's exactly it. It's taking the gifts that God has given you and using them to serve other people. And if more of us did that, and if I did it better, than I have, the whole world will be a better place. And again, you're exactly right. That's why confident humility is my thing, because I've done the whole pride thing, and it cost me everything but my actual life. And it's not a good road to go down. I'd much rather go down the road of humility and make it about other people. So let me serve my wife. Let me serve my kids. Let me serve my students. Let me serve my community. Let me serve my church, because then it's not about me. So I don't have to worry about it. I can do the best that I can do and trust that God will handle the rest.
Amen to that. And then speaking of serving, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of stuff out there for the world to find out more about you. So where can we keep up with what you're doing and purchase your book, Inverted Leadership?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. The book's available on Amazon, or you can also find it on my website, which is the easiest place to find me. That website is www.reallifeleading.com. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is @reallifeleading. Or you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook under my name, Joel Hawbaker. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/reallifeleading. And so I'd love to hear from your audience. Send me an email or a message or a tweet or whatever. Let me know how I can help you. Let me know if you have been impacted by anything that we've said. And I love to hear about that kind of stuff. I love to hear that the gospel is making an impact on other people. So I'd love to connect with any of your listeners that have gotten anything out of this. That'd be awesome.
Woohoo! Awesome, awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. The one and only Joel Hawbaker, baby. Go out there and buy some copies of his book. Share it with your friends. Speak, especially the gospel. Heck, even one colleague one time called it the go spell, baby. So go ahead and spell out the good stuff that's out there for the world to hear and see, baby.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it. And again, if I can do anything for you or for your audience, man, just let me know, and I'm glad to help out.
Woohoo!
Hey there, buddy. Looks like you made it to the end of this episode. Since you made it to the end of this episode, do both of us a favor and stop being greedy. Stop it right now and share this episode with your friends and your fellow podcast lovers, especially those who have book clubs and want to listen to the authors who write some amazing books. Be sure to check out the rest of the backlog too while you're at it, and share all those too. And in order to make the rest of your week the best of your week, remember to advance others, to advance yourself.